Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest, absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs. Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. I hope you all had a very merry, absolutely wonderful Christmas. I know I did. It was quiet and cold. It was quite cold here. They said it was the coldest Christmas since 1998. And I remember very clearly the Christmas of 1998 was I was living in the mountains of North Carolina, not far from where my house is now. And I will never forget that one because we had snow, then we had ice, then it went down to below zero. I think it was about -10 or so. And I had the flu. I had the flu. And fortunately, I was an herbalist at the time and was snowed in, but I had made a lot of tinctures. And all the tinctures that could be consumed as warming beverages, shall we say, and take the edge off of the flu were consumed in that week of being snowed in without any power. I remember just lying beside the fire with my dogs, trying to stay warm, and I would get up, every hour or so, bundle up, go outside in the ice, take a big axe handle and beat the ice off of the wood pile, break up the ice, and bring in a few logs to put by the fire to, dry out, and then keep feeding to the fire. And yeah, we got through it, but it was not pleasant. If I had not had a bunch of pint and quart jars full of herbs and vodka, I would have been even more miserable than I was. So this one was not that bad. This one was just cold and windy, no precipitation. But one thing I do remember strongly from that experience was one of the tinctures I had made was a hops bud tincture. And today's show is going to be all about hops. Now, at that point, I don't believe I was brewing beer yet. I was making ciders and wines and such as that, but I didn't really get into beer brewing until I was down in Georgia. I went to the University of Georgia, and now if y'all are of a certain age, you may remember that Georgia once had a phenomenally good music scene. It was home to REM and a band called Pylon and another one called Widespread Panic, you may have heard of. A couple members of the Allman Brothers lived in the area. They were always jamming, and but probably my favorite Athens band of all time um, was, well, next to the Starroom Boys. Now, the Starroom Boys were not around very long, but they were a fantastic country band, by the way. Sort of an alt country band, very into like Graham Parsons and that kind of thing. But that's an aside. Best band was the B-52s. Love the B-52s. Grew up listening to them in the 80s. Very, very fun band. And the brewing club in town was called the Brew 52s. And yes, we met in a love shack with a tin roof, rusted, had a car as big as a whale. You know the song. But that's when I really got into brewing beer. And learning about the history of beer and the ingredients of beer. And as an herbalist, oh, this was fascinating. There are all kinds of mishaps with beer brewing. I remember one morning I had been brewing a stout for St. Patrick's Day, and the fermentation lock, the airlock had become clogged, and I awoke one morning to a fountain of beer spraying all over the kitchen as the pressure blew the top off of that carboy. Carboy, by the way, is a 5 gallon glass jug, and that's what I like to brew in. But let's get back to the history of beer and hops. Now, it surprises a lot of people that hops were not the traditional bittering agent of beer. In fact, it was the great herbalist Saint Hildegard von Bingen that first introduced hops into beer brewing. Before then, there were many herbs used to bitter and preserve beer. You see, the bittering agent in beer, whether it's hops or another herb, does two things. It balances the flavor of the beer, which can otherwise be kind of bland and sweet if you don't have a bitter herb, and it helps preserve the beer. In a time before pasteurization and refrigeration and all that, people were used herbs to preserve their beers so they didn't turn into essentially beer vinegars. You know, whenever you introduce yeast to a liquid containing sugar, it immediately begins to consume the sugars and to some extent starches, but mostly sugars, and it converts them into alcohol. It converts them into carbon dioxide gas. That's the digestion process. That's why beer is carbonated. And they also produce B vitamins. So that's a very interesting and important aspect of the brewing process. If you drink naturally homebrewed beer, you have a beverage that is high in, it can be high in protein depending on how you make it, especially if you make a good stout or a porter or a good brown ale. It's high in selenium. It's high in B vitamins thanks to the yeast. And the herbal component also has medicinal value. So originally, the most popular beer in Europe seems to have been Groot. Now, I've mentioned Groot before. Groot was flavored with three herbs, two of which are in the bay laurel family, essentially Myrica Gale and one that's I think called marsh rosemary, but it's not rosemary. It's actually in the bay laurel family, and another herb that's in the heath family. Now, this is very interesting because when this was the most popular beer in Europe before the time of Saint Hildegard von Bingen, which was around 1100 AD, the beer actually had a somewhat hallucinogenic effect. It stirred passions and battle fervor, and people thoroughly enjoyed it. If you ever imagine like ancient Europe as say like a soccer game, and you can imagine all those football hooligans, as they call it, being all hopped up on modern beer. Just imagine giving them some Groot. This was the beer of rampaging and pillaging and all that. And apparently it was quite celebratory, but it produced very strong hangovers. I have not yet made Groot. I would like to give it a try at some point just to see what it was like. But those herbs can be very harsh on the system and they cause major headaches. Now, they do have medicinal value. We've talked about that before when we talked about bay leaf. Very good for colds and congestions and different things, and digestion and all that. But these were very strong beers. If anyone tells you that, yeah, our ancestors drank a lot of beer, but it was low alcohol beer, they're full of it. Okay, that's not true. Strong beer was a staff of life, essentially. The water was not clean to drink. People worked hard, often living in very cold environments, and they drank beer really from morning till night because it was safer to drink than the water and because it was full of nutrition. It was liquid bread. And that nutritious beer happens to be very high in alcohol. It's not a Miller High Life from the grocery store. This is like, legit beer. Other herbs that were used to flavor and preserve beer, of course, would be mugwort. Mugwort, or mugswort, as you often see in Old English, uh, gets its name as having been used as a bittering and preserving agent in beer before hops. There were several other herbs. One of the most popular was cowslip. Cowslip well, it has a sedative effect, and so in the beer, it actually gave people a relaxed sense of calm, helped with pain, and just made life a lot more pleasant. And it was so popular that cowslip was severely overharvested throughout England and the British Isles to the point that it became an endangered plant for a period of time. I believe it's making a comeback, but that's a very nice herb. Cowslip is like I said, it's a sedative herb. It helps with pain. It helps relax the muscles. It gives someone a pleasant, calm feeling. You may know its cultivated relative, the primrose. Primroses are beautiful flowers. They're just one of those flowers that's too pretty to even look real. So if you want to use some cowslip or primrose as a medicinal herb, get some pots and start growing it out. The unimproved, I guess you would say, cowslip is not as showy of a plant, but it's a pretty yellow flower with green leaves. And primroses come in just all kinds of bright, like neon colors. And, it's going to be a very nice addition to your landscape or potted plant in your house, and you'll have it whenever you need it. You can make cowslip or primrose tea if you don't have time to brew beer, or you can make a tincture. But by, somewhere between 1080 and 1100, Saint Hildegard, the greatest herbalist of all time, in my opinion, she is the one. Uh, Actually, this would have been somewhere around 1160, if I'm not mistaken. She wrote of hops. And remember, she is the one who got her knowledge of herbal medicine from visions of angels and speaking with the voice of the living light, as she called it. So this is, heavenly knowledge imparted, I should say, to a very devout and mystical nun in the Middle Ages. She was an abbess. She became an abbess. She was most respected lady in all of Europe, without a doubt. And she's one of the doctors of the Catholic Church. She wrote in Physica, the hop plant is warm and dry and has moderate moisture. It is not very useful in befitting man because it makes him melancholy and it makes the soul of man sad. It weighs down his inner organs. Yet, as a result of its own bitterness, keep some putrefaction from drinks to which it may be added, so that it may help them last so much longer. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? We don't really think of hops in that way, but hops being a sedative uh, certainly has a calming effect. It can help with sleep. Hops is a very good sleep aid. You can put the dry flowers in a pillow and keep it by your bed, and just by inhaling really sort of the pollen and such that comes out of them, that will help with sleep. In fact, it's part of lore. It's a famous fact of hop farming that the folks that go out in the fields to pick the hops flowers often fall asleep in the fields. Now, this is important because when the beers were made as Groot, and I have that list of herbs right in front of me now. It was Mirica Gale, which is also called myrtle, yarrow, and what was called wild rosemary, which is not a rosemary. It's a lednum. It's in the Labrador tea family, which is in the bay laurel family. Now, yarrow is a very commonly used herb in traditional herbal medicine. We've talked at great length about it. Often used to stop bleeding. It's a soldier's herb. They used to carry it going into battle for treating wounds. Um, Taken as a tea, it's very good for internal bleeding and diarrhea and all that. So, out of those three herbs, yarrow is the one we still use mostly today, and it's certainly the safest of those herbs. But remember what I said about how that beer would get people all worked up. Uh, Apparently, they also added henbane to beer. Henbane is in the same family as like jimsonweed and belladonna. Strongly psychoactive, causes hallucinations, causes everything from rage to terror. So this was, Groot was a serious beer. It was not, the alcohol was not the most intoxicating effect of that beer. I mean, these people were taking, the equivalent today, almost like a PCP or something in their beer, and with the results would be pretty predictable after having done that. And that's probably why we have so many legends of witches flying around and ghosts and goblins behind every tree and all kinds of, demons in the woods and such. Our European ancestors were quite stoned. Um, when St. Hildegard came up with the use of hops, it was embraced by the church. There was only one church at the time. It was the Catholic Church. Um, well, with its close relative, the Orthodox Greek Orthodox Church, and the European laws would have had no effect over the Greeks. But the Greeks were much more into wine, so that's not here nor there. In most of Europe, there was only one church, and it was the Catholic Church, and it was decreed that beer should be made with water, grains, and hops and yeast. Well, the yeast was actually wild in the air. They didn't have yeast in little packets like they call it now. It was known in Old German as God is good because when the beer began to bubble, it was seen to be a blessing from God. Beer was very much considered to be a blessing from God. I mean, like I said, the water was not clean, and without beer, there would be no European civilization whatsoever. People would have died. So the church embraced the use of hops in beer. The governments of the time embraced the use of hops in beer, especially in Germany, where they set into law the Pure Brewing Act that specified hops was the herb to be used in throughout England and well, several other European nations. You had a great business opportunity in this, and it was really taken advantage of at the time. You see, beer brewing used to be seen as a women's job, and it was often done by older women, widows, and they would take on younger women and teach them the craft. A mother might brew some beer at home for her family, but a single woman brewed beer for the entire community. And the beers they brewed were in big black cauldrons. And brewers, cannot remember the name for women who brewed beer, brew mistresses or something, I can't remember, wore long, tall, pointy black hats. And when the beer was done, they hung a broom over the doorway to let people know beer was ready for sale. So, very much our description of a witch, like the Wicked Witch of the West on The Wizard of Oz, which I watched last night. I love The Wizard of Oz. I watch it every year. Is patterned after a Middle Ages brew mistress, a woman who brewed beer in the Middle Ages. That's the exact description of what we think of as a witch. When these laws were passed, these women did not have access to hops. They were not growing hops. So business interests saw an opportunity to take over the brewing industry, and they widely publicized that these witches were making toxic brews that made men crazy and possessed with demons and evil spirits. Now, if they were putting henbane into that beer, or mandrake, or any of those herbs that actually were used at the time, you can certainly understand why people would think they were having a magic brew of being bewitched. But really, a lot of our prejudice against herbal medicine and a lot of our myths, a lot of the myths that modern day witches and Wiccans still embrace, really come from publicity by business interests meant to put the women who brewed beer in their cottages out of business. Very ironic, I think, that especially in the neo-pagan movement that tends to be ultra feminist, they're actually embracing the myths per- perpetrated, perpetuated, whatever spread by male business interests meant to smear and disparage the women who made beer and had a cottage industry. A little bit of irony, remember, history doesn't always repeat itself, but it often rhymes, to quote Mark Twain. So anyway, if you're really interested in this history, I highly recommend Stephen Herrick Buhner's book, Sacred and Healing Herbal Beers. Buhner's one of my favorite, well, probably my favorite herbalist writer in the modern era. His stuff is impeccable. I mean, he does research. His garden used to be the Attorney General of the United States. So this is a real serious guy, but he's also an old hippie, and he's also ultra liberal and doesn't seem to be very Christian. He goes off on some odd tangents, but talk about a brilliant guy. I love his book, really. So beyond beer, beyond hops being used in beer, it also had long use in herbal medicine. Now, going back to the ancient Greeks, Dioscorides wrote of hops under the name of Byram. He said Byram is sometimes called splenchon. I have no idea. I don't speak Greek and I can't pronounce it. He said it is found on trees such as cedars, white poplars, or oaks. The best grows on cedar. Next is that which grows on white poplar. That which smells sweetest and is white is the best, but that which is black is the worst. Byram, that's hops, is astringent. Used either hot or cold, it is good in decoctions made for all disorders requiring bathing around the vulva. It is mixed with ointments and made into suppositories with other ointments for the astringent quality in it, and is used in the preparation of perfumes and put into medicines called akapi, I guess akape, to remove fatigue, which is very odd, isn't it? I talked about how hops are sedative. Hops also have an estrogenic effect. They are a phyto or plant estrogen. When we talk about men having a beer gut, it's really not so much the calories from the beer as it is the estrogen in the beer causing them to carry excess fat around their stomach. Most men don't know this, but it's a good reason to brew your own beer if you don't want man boobs. You can use other herbs, or you can use less hops, or you can use a lot of hops if you like hops. I happen to like a good English bitter every now and then, or an IPA, but not as a rule. Brown ale, porter, stout, that's really my favorite. A dark lager, really like that. I'm not big on the sweet pale lagers, but again, I'm going down a tangent. Be in the British tradition, Gerard wrote in the 1500s. He said the flowers of the hop are hot and dry in the second degree. They fill and stuff the head and hurt the same with their strong smell. Of the same temperature also are the leaves themselves, which do likewise open and cleanse. So apparently Gerard probably had an allergy to hops. That's really what he's saying. And he believed they caused people's heads to be stuffed. He said of the virtues of the plant, that the buds or first sprouts which come forth in spring are used to be eaten in salads, yet are they, as Pliny saith, much more toothsome than nourishing, for they yield but very small nourishment, notwithstanding they may be good for the entrails, both in opening and procuring of urine, and likewise in keeping the body soluble. Old English again, we're talking Elizabethan times. Let me kind of translate that. Hops are an edible plant. They're actually quite tasty. As he said, they are quite toothsome. They have been a popular edible plant at least since the time of Pliny, which was ancient Greece. Um, you'll never see these in a store. If you want to have this, you're going to have to grow hops yourself. Fortunately, in the past few decades, that has become legal again. Yes, believe it or not, from the time of Prohibition until I believe around 1980. Now, I'd have to look it up and verify that. Maybe even the late 80s. It was illegal for you to grow your own hops. Just as those business interests had put the brewing women out of business in the Middle Ages through passing law, the big brewing companies in America, your Bush and Anheuser and all that, uh, lobbied and got Congress to outlaw the average American's ability to grow hops at home, for fear we might make our own beer. Yes, in the land of the free and the home of the brave, hops was just as illegal as its cousin, cannabis. The two, that's the only thing they have in common is being related. Hops will not get you high. You can smoke as much as you want, and all it's going to do is make you cough. Okay. But it is actually in the cannabis family. And for decades, they were both illegal. And now we can grow our own hops and we can enjoy it as a food. Again, we can enjoy it as an herb. I think it's wonderful to grow the vines of hops in an area in your yard, maybe where you'd like to sit on a shady day, relax in the evening, and let the hops help just kind of lull you to sleep. Maybe plant a little lavender around, relaxing herbs around the hammock or your favorite outdoor chair. Make a little beer garden, have a nice cold beer while you're out there on a hot afternoon. Just take a nap. Uh, but to continue translating what he was saying, he didn't find it to be very nourishing, and it's actually shown to be quite healthy for you. It's a very nutritious plant, but would be good as fiber to keep you from getting constipated. That's what he means when he said the opening of the entrails also has a diuretic effect. And you know how beer makes you pee? Well, hops is part of the reason why. It has a diuretic effect. It helps stimulate the flow of urine. He goes on to say the leaves and little tender stalks, and also the flowers themselves, remove the stoppings of the liver and spleen. Purge by urine, help the spleen, cleanse the blood, and are profitable against long lingering agues, that's fevers. Hops do help with a fever. Topically used for scabs and sores on the skin. And he said, especially if they were boiled in whey. He said the juice, this is actually the juice pressed out of hops, which you'll have to make this yourself or never find in a store. He said was very good for removing the obstructions of the entrail. That means anything from constipation to a serious intestinal block. And he said it helped with congestion, cholera, or phlegm. And he also recommended the juice to be used as eardrops to, well, as he said, remove the congestion, stench, and corruption thereof. Wow. The flowers are used to season beer or ale with, and too many do cause the bitterness thereof and are ill for the head. Well, uh, he believed they would give you a headache, in other words. It would make the beer more likely to give you a headache. The flowers make bread light, and that's also an interesting European tradition, is they used to bake hops flowers in bread. I have not seen anyone doing this currently. If you bake bread, and have tried that, let me know. I'd love to know what hops are like in bread. I love herbed breads in general. I love focaccia bread. Oh man, I love to make focaccia bread and do some good olive oil with some Italian herbs and hot pepper in there. Dip the bread in there. That's one of my favorite things. So I'm a big fan of herb bread. So if you've ever made it with hops, let me know how that goes. He recommended a decoction of hops. It's essentially a tea. A decoction is just a tea for stoppings of the liver, spleen, and kidneys, and purges the blood from all corrupt humors, causing the same to come forth in the urine. So again, he's talking about opening obstructions of essentially the digestive organs or excretory organs and flushing the system through the urine. He said, the juice of hops openeth the belly and driveth forth yellow and choleric humors, and purgeth the blood from all filthiness. So he believed hops were a blood cleanser. Hops were a good tonic for the system. He said the manifold virtues of hops do manifestly argue the wholesomeness of beer above ale, for the hops rather make the physical drink to keep the body in health than an ordinary drink for the quenching of our thirst. 1800s England, and as I said, they believe beer bittered with hops to be the healthiest thing one could drink. And it really is, actually. If we drank more beer than we did sodas, sweet soft drinks, we wouldn't be in an epidemic of obesity and heart disease and all that. Now, am I recommending drinking alcohol? No. If you're an alcoholic, if you have a history of alcoholism in the family, I'm absolutely not recommending it. But I definitely think that natural, home brewed or craft brewed beer is far healthier than anything from a Coca-Cola to bottled water. Yeah, bottled water is often, well, it's often not as pure as it says. And the bottles, the plastic, leaches toxins into the water, cancer causing toxins and estrogen. One of the main reasons that men today have about 50% lower testosterone than their grandfathers and about 50% lower sperm count is because of all the estrogens we're exposed to in our environment. Chemical estrogens from plastics, Estrogenic products like soy. Soy is a phytoestrogen. Corn syrup and excess consumption of sugar decreases testosterone production, etc. Um, like I said, hops have an estrogenic effect, but as Gerard was pointing out, at the time they differentiated beer from ale because they didn't hop ale. Ale, real ale, it does not have to really have any hops, maybe a little, or you can always use another herb to bitter it if you don't want to have any hops. And a good brown ale is usually served at room temperature and basically flat. And for some reason, Americans don't like warm, flat beer. I know that seems like an odd concept, but that's what real ale is. And I tell you, once you get a taste for it, it's really not half bad, really. And you can bottle it and carbonate it, and you can chill it. You don't have to have it warm and flat. But, tell the fanatical real beer brewers in England. They would they would think that was heresy. They want that ale to be flat and room temperature. And like I said, it actually is quite good. Excellent with a meal. Probably nothing better with a good plate of roast beef and gravy and some mashed potatoes. Culpeper wrote of hops. He said they were so well known they needed no description. This was the 1600s, and at this time, people were growing them in the garden. They were cultivating it. And he said, I mean the manured kind, which every good husband or housewife is acquainted with. But what that means is people were fertilizing and cultivating their hops vines, and they were being grown in every home. He talks a little bit about the difference between wild hops and the cultivated hops. And before I get into the rest of what he said, it's important to point out that there are some varieties of wild hops that, well, they all have little prickles and spines on the vines that helps them climb trees. They actually grow very tall. If you have an area of your yard where you need to screen out a view or have a little privacy, you can set some hops vines up to grow, and they'll grow 70 feet. And they grow in a season. It's incredible. They really grow in the second year, by the way. But they're a great plant to grow. The wild ones, there's at least one variety and maybe a few that if you're scratched by the thorns, they make you sick. They seem to have sort of a venom. They make give you like flu-like symptoms. So you want to be a little careful with that. But cultivated hops generally do not have that faculty. And you can get hops vines from many places. I believe Baker Creek has them. I know Strictly Medicinal Herbs has them. It's best to grow them from vine cuttings or from small plants, but you can grow them from seed. There are a few companies that do have hop seeds. Anyway, going back to Culpeper, again, this is 1600s, and he loved to associate herbalism with astrology. And he said that hops was under the dominion of Mars. And what he means by that is like what Gerard and Dioscorides were saying that in its energetic nature, as we would say as herbalists, it is hot. It's a hot natured plant, which is very odd because I actually find it to be a cooling herb. But for some reason, traditionally, hops has been considered to be a hot herb. I put hops in my cooling bitters sometimes. I'll take dandelion and burdock root and a little hops bud because it's a nice bitter herb. And I kind of disagree with them on it being a hot herb, but hey, they knew better than me, so we'll go with that. He said, this in physical operations is to open obstructions of the liver and spleen, to cleanse the blood, to loosen the belly, to cleanse the reins from gravel, that's the kidneys essentially, and to provoke urine. The decoction of the tops of hops, as well of the tame as the wild, works to the same effect. In cleansing the blood, they help cure the French diseases. I'm not sure what a French disease is, actually. Um, and all manner of scabs, itch, and other breakings out of the body, as also all tetters, ringworms, spreading sores, and morphew and discoloration of skin. Those are all essentially skin infections, usually bacterial and fungal in nature. The decoction of the flowers and hops, decoction of the flowers of hops do help expel poisons that anyone hath drank. Half a dram of the seeds in powder taken in a drink kills the worms in the body, brings down women's courses, I mean stimulates menstruation, and expels urine. A syrup made from of the juice and sugar cures the yellow jaundice, eases headaches that come from heat, and tempers the heat of the liver and stomach. So Again, see, that's sort of how I see it as more of a cooling herb. Then that's kind of how I use it, actually, to reduce liver inflammation, calm the liver and stomach. It actually stimulates the appetite, and is profitable given in long and hot agues, that's fevers, specifically malarial fevers, that rise in choler and blood. Both the wild and manured are of one property, and alike effectual in the aforesaid diseases. By all these testimonies, beer appears to be better than ale. So again, he's saying beer, because it contains hops, was better than ale, which at the time did not contain hops. Um, 1930 or so, Miss Grieve wrote in a modern herbal. She kind of synthesizes the Western European tradition, especially British. She says hops appears to have been used in the breweries of the Netherlands beginning in the 14th century. In England, they were not used in the composition of beer till nearly 2 centuries afterward. The liquor prepared from fermented malt formed the favorite drink of our Saxon and Danish forefathers. The beverage went by the name of ale, the word derived from the Scandinavian "ole," a Viking drink, and was brewed either from malt alone or from a mixture of the latter with honey and floured with heath tops. That's a very interesting legend in and of itself. The ancient beer or ale of England was said to have originally been brewed by the Picts. The Picts were the little people that were wiped out by the ancient Anglo-Saxons. They were exterminated. And their heath flavored beer was said to be the finest in the world. It caused relaxation, pleasant thoughts, great dreams. Um, may have had a little bit of what we call a hypnotic or hallucinogenic effect, but in a very pleasant and relaxing way. And when the Picts were exterminated in a genocide, that knowledge was lost. No one knows how to make heath ale as was described in the ancient writings of the beer that the Picts brewed. In fact, heath can be quite poisonous. Heath can cause poisoning, death, and hallucinations and such, to the point that honey that bees have made where they've been gathering the nectar from the heath blossoms can actually be toxic. So how the Picts made their legendary beer is unknown, and uh, to the ages due to a genocide that really no one talks about because everyone is supposed to act like the British are wonderful and can do no wrong. They didn't, enslave and subjugate the Irish and slaughter half the country because they refused to give up Catholicism. No, they're wonderful and very cultured, and everything on PBS tells us how we should be more like the English. I have nothing against England. I have many English friends, but to be ignorant to history, as we said before, makes it much more likely to happen again. Anyway, she also mentions that other herbs were used before hops in England, including ground ivy, which is a plant we've discussed before, various other bitter and aromatic herbs. Some used were marjoram, buckbean, wormwood, yarrow, wood sage, or germander, and broom. Now, broom is another one interesting one. Broom, Scotch broom, common weed along the side of the road, is can be fairly hallucinogenic. It has to be processed in a certain way, and I believe broom. I can't remember if it has thujone or another compound. Thujone is what's in wormwood, which is also hallucinogenic. You can see, our ancestors were not only drinking strong beer, but they were using some strong, powerfully mind-altering herbs, by the way. They knew not, however, the ale to which hops gave both flavor and preservation, for long after the introduction of hops, the liquor flavored by the old manner retained the name of ale, while the word of German and Dutch origin, beer or beer, that's Bierbeer, was given only to that made with the newly introduced bitter catkins of hops. And she also mentions that the planting and growing of hops was actually forbidden in the reign of King Henry VI, and that again had to do with business interests. But Half a century later, hops production started in earnest in Flanders. The prejudice against the use of hops was at first great, but Henry VIII forbade brewers to put hops or sulfur in ale, interestingly. But eventually, by Edward VI, hops, and by James I, hops had really taken hold as being a main ingredient in beer in England, and it began to push out the traditional ales. She said hops at first were thought to engender melancholy. What Dioscorides said about that. John Evelyn wrote, transmuted our wholesome that hops transmuted our wholesome ale into beer, which doubtless much alters its constitution. This one ingredient, by some suspected not unworthily, preserves the drink indeed, but repays the pleasure in tormenting diseases and a shorter life. So in 1670, John Evelyn, who was an herbalist, was warning that he thought the hops had made ale unhealthy, that it led to a shorter life and headaches. And whereas Culpeper and Gerard and many others were saying that the beer made with hops was much healthier for you than the ales made without hops. I say that I guess the jury's still out on that one. But getting into the medicinal uses, Ms. Grieve said that hops have tonic, nervine, diuretic, and anodyne properties. Their volatile oil produces sedative and soporific effects, means it helps you sleep. And the lupameric acid or bitter principle is stomachic and tonic. It's good to help settle the stomach and stimulate appetite. For this reason, hops improves appetite and promotes sleep. And at that time, which was right in the 1930s, hops were in the official pharmacopoeia. They would be prescribed by a doctor. And she mentions that a warm pillow of hops can help relieve a toothache or an earache and allay nervous irritation. You would put that on the area that's affected and try to get some sleep. It would help with both. Um, she said that steeping hops in sherry what makes a capital stomach cordial, an excellent cordial for settling the stomach and increasing. She said that an infusion, essentially a tea, of the leaves, strobles, and stalks, made into a hop tea, taken by the wine glass full 2 or 3 times a day in the early spring, is good for sluggish liver, so it's good liver tonic. Hop tea is frequently sold by grocers, so that was at that time. Now you'll have to make it yourself. She said it cleanses the blood, and for calculus trouble, nothing is better. That means kidney and bladder stones, gallstones. Um, and used externally, hops combined with chamomile flowers or poppy heads was used for swellings of a painful nature, inflammation, neuralgia, rheumatic pain, bruises, boils, etc. It removes pain and allays inflammation in a very short time. Hops may also be applied as a poultice, and that was how Dioscorides was recommending it almost 2,000 years earlier. At the time, there was actually a drug on the market called lupulin, which was a bitters formula and was mildly sedative, inducing sleep without causing a headache. So, hops was used in many ways in the 1930s. We'll get up to current herbal use. We'll go to plants for future. They say hops has a long and proven history of herbal use, where they are employed mainly for their soothing, sedative, tonic, and calming effect on the body and mind. Their strongly bitter flavor largely accounts for their ability to strengthen and stimulate digestion, increasing gastric and other secretions. Female fruiting body is anodyne. That's the flowers, essentially. Okay, anodyne, antiseptic, antispasmodic, diuretic, febrifuge, that means it helps lower fever. Hypnotic means it helps get you to sleep. Nervine, it calms the nerves. Sedative, stomachic and tonic. I think we're good. Hops are widely used as a folk remedy to treat a range of complaints, including boils, bruises, calculuses, calculi, I guess, cancer, cramps, cancer even, cramps, coughs, cystitis, debility, delirium, diarrhea, dyspepsia, that means indigestion, fever, fits, hysteria, inflammation, insomnia, jaundice, nerves, neuralgia, rheumatism, and worms. A panacea there. The hairs on the fruits contain lupulin, sedative and hypnotic drug. When given to nursing mothers, lupulin increases the flow of milk. Recent research has shown that it contains a related hormone that could account for this effect. The decoction for the flower is said to remedy swellings and hardness of the uterus. Hop flowers are much used as an infusion, that's a tea, or can be used to stuff pillows with, uh, where the weight of the head releases the volatile oils. The fruit is also applied externally as a poultice to ulcers, boils, painful swellings, etc. It is said to remedy painful tumors. The female flowering heads are harvested in the autumn and can be used fresh or dried. Alcoholic extracts of hops in various dosages and forms have been used clinically in treating numerous forms of leprosy, pulmonary tuberculosis, and acute bacterial dysentery with varying degrees of success in China. The female fruiting body contains humulone and lupulone. These are highly bacteriostatic against gram-positive and acid-fast bacteria. That's very important. And remember how we were saying that they were often used topically for many skin infections. They have an antibiotic effect, essentially an antimicrobial effect. A cataplasm of the leaf is said to remedy cold tumors. Known hazards, skin contact with the plant causes dermatitis in sensitive people. Hops dermatitis has long been recognized. Not only the hands and face, but legs have suffered from purple eruptions due to hop picking. Although only 1 in 3,000 workers is estimated to be affected, and 1 in 30 believed to suffer some level of dermatitis, essentially. Dislodged hairs from the plant can irritate the eye. So, sedative value of hops has been known for centuries. The antimicrobial value of the hops, the diuretic value of the hops, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think a great sleep mixture is a tincture made of hops, skullcap, and passion flower. I've made that before. It's an excellent sleep remedy, especially when you're like lying awake at 4 a.m. and you can't shut your mind off. That combination really helps. And so that's hops, y'all. As I said, great plant to grow. Once you get it established, it is fairly easy. Great way to block out a view or give you some privacy. And just a wonderful medicinal plant. And if you want to get into beer brewing, I highly recommend the books written by Charlie Papazian. You can look them up. They're just real classics, and they were very popular in the 80s and 90s. You can grab a used copy from your favorite used bookseller for probably $3 or $4, and they'll teach you how to make beers from kits. That's where you get dried malt or uh, well, a liquid malt that's condensed into a syrup, a malt syrup, and they give you a recipe of how much water and how much hops to use and exactly what kind of yeast and all that. Or you can get into making real beers and ales by using barley and other grains that you malt yourself. You use spurge and sparge and all that fun zyme. I think the official word, the Latin name for beer brewing is zymurgy. This would be zymergistic practices. So you can learn a little bit of fun lingo and make yourself some nice beverages. Just remember, if you drink, drink responsibly. Y'all have a wonderful week. I will talk with you next time. And I guess we're getting ready for New Year's now. Hopefully, it's going to be a little warmer than Christmas.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.